that was the number one thing. How do I let these people be themselves without and not lean on them without limiting their talents or their self-beliefs? And that was always primary for me as a coach.
All right, today's guest is a world-renowned high-performance coach who's blended the worlds of psychology and triathlon to develop national and world-class champions. He's been an athlete all his life, starting with surfing and then moving into triathlon and racing professionally for over a decade. But it was his own personal experiences with anxiety and the help of a psychologist that helped him lead into the world of studying psychology and incorporating this into his own coaching. He's the coach of the incredible Aeromax Triathlon team, producing numerous champions over the years. So, without further ado, welcome and thank you for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show, Grant Giles. How are you, mate?
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me on. So stoked to be here today. This is amazing.
It's been too long, actually. You're somebody that I've always seen around, and I'm like, sometimes I'm wondering, how am I in my 5th year of doing this show, and I'm only just getting you on now, but I'm so stoked to have you. Where are you joining me from? Where are you calling in? You were talking about wearing scarves and you're all rugged up.
It's not cold here, mate. I'm just soft. I mean, I'm up near Byron Bay these days, near Brunswick Heads. So, beautiful. I mean, the squad was in Lennox Head. Yeah. So we've always been north. Yeah. So it's not cold here. I'm just soft.
Oh, that was so funny for everybody listening. He had this puff jacket going on. I said, "Oh, you might want to take that off for the recording. I can't hear you over the movement of the jacket." I thought you were down. Weren't you originally from Wollongong? Was that home base for you, or were you down south and moved up north, or you always been up there?
Yeah, no, I was in Wollongong. I grew up in Wollongong, but I moved to. I wasn't far from you at one stage. I was in Manly for a while.
That's right.
And then Coleroy, and then 2006 we moved north to Lennox, and that's when Aeromax got its legs.
Oh man, for anybody listening around the world, you get a chance to come to Australia, there's a couple of places I suggest you go to. Obviously Sydney, the greatest city on the earth. That's where I am right now, actually. But then head up north, get up to where Grant's talking about, which is that Lennox Head, Brunswick Heads, Byron Bay. Absolutely phenomenal, beautiful part of the world, mate. I don't blame you for being up there. I find it hilarious that you got a scarf and full jackets on. Winter up there is pretty mild. That's awesome. So what are you doing these days up there? Are you still coaching in the world of triathlon? You moving around a bit?
Well, that's interesting. I took some time out from coaching after we shut Aeromax down, and I went and studied psychotherapy and hypnotherapy because I was so interested in the psychology side of things. And I've come back into coaching, and I'm only just starting to coach professional athletes again. Like, I've been in age group for a long time, which I'm going to stay in.
Yep.
But it's I've started to mix some coaching there, and also some mentorship stuff with other sports. Strangely enough, combat sports. Doing mental preps for MMA fighters, Muay Thai fighters, and that sorts of thing. So it's kind of this broad mix of working with athletes, which you work out after a while is essentially all the same thing. The approach is pretty much
we're all emotional basket cases, mate. All emotional basket cases, and it's like, how can I help these guys just get to neutral, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. And the benefit of doing a little bit of work in combat sports is that their safety is on the line. So if they're not psychologically stable, they're in danger. And we are too in many ways in triathlon, your goals are on the line, your namesakes are on the line. Even for age groupers, it's like really important for us to have good, stable platforms to work from.
Yeah. Look, I want to dive into all of this in this episode. This is one of my favorite topics of all. Before we do, are you keeping abreast of all things triathlon? We're only a couple of weeks out from the Olympic Games. Are you kind of keeping in touch with it a little bit? You've said you're coaching a few professional athletes again. Where do you think we're going to get a swim in Paris?
Oh yeah, I hope so.
I don't know. It's like I don't know how much you're keeping abreast of it. I think it's like there's this world of. I think we're all sitting on the sidelines here, going, "Is the River Seine going to be swimmable?"
Yeah.
But then I go back. Well, we swam it in the mid '90s. I don't know why we can't do it now. But anyway, and what triathletes are you coaching at the moment?
I'm coaching mostly age groupers, but I've picked up a young ITU guy actually, who's really interesting because, and it's, I was talking to John O'Hall the other day. It's good to be putting my feet back in the water there because it does, it does stretch your brain, and it really is great to be helping young athletes again, because I think that's where my strength's always been, with young athletes and helping them make that cross from upper age groups to professional level, or up, junior ITU up. Yeah, so I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome, buddy. Awesome. Well, what I want to do first up is just rewind the clock. I'd love to, I touched on a few of your background in the introduction, but if you can take us through, how you found your passion for the world of sport, and then, moving into psychology and that side of things. So just let's rewind that clock. I know it's a little ways, but tell us a little bit about your journey to getting to where you are now.
Yeah, look, the thing is, having worked with so many people for so long, and I'm sure you're the same, you get this realization around the patterns of type A personalities or athletes, and I was one of them, right? Like, didn't have the easiest childhood, and I think sometimes we deal with trauma by going into sport, and for me, sport was a savior. First, it was surfing and traveling, surfing around the world, and then I made my way into triathlon by accident, training at a surf club, and a few of the guys were doing triathlon, and that's how I found my way into it. And once I found my way into triathlon, I felt like I was home. Here's somewhere I can put all this energy and channel it into something that was healthy and good for me. And that's how I got into triathlon. And it's like everybody else. It started, it kind of went along. I did some age group racing for a few years, but then I just it just progressed from there. I steadily got better, and after a while I found myself at the front end of the age groups, and I found myself at the in the pro ranks, and away you go, right? Like, you just do the best you can from there.
Yeah. And when were you kind of an athlete? Was it a hard decision for you to go into the professional ranks? Were you working on the side, or did you just go all in? And I mean, because this was in the 90s, and the sport was still a little bit of a free-for-all. Was it easy for you, that transition into being a professional athlete?
Oh, no, it was really hard.
Were you just somebody that waltzed on it? No, I get it. It's really hard.
No, I did those things everybody else did. Pack shelves at Woolies at night, all these
Sizzler,
things.
Mate. Worked as Sizzler.
Yeah. Did what needed to be done, and I had a wife and kids, and it wasn't easy, but it was a very, very valuable experience. And for me, it was an experience. The pressure of that was something that made me kind of wake up to myself over time. You know what I mean? I became aware of my own thought patterns and what drove me and what exhausted me, and all these things, and that's kind of what piqued this interest in psychology. But at first, it was to assuage my own struggles with anxiety, and then it became like a passion.
It's funny, Laura always sort of termed it as we learn a lot of life's lessons through sport, and to get to know yourself, your strengths, and let's call them your not so strengths, and who you are as an individual. I think the beauty of either combat sport or endurance sport, these sports that they just rock you, to the bone. They really can take you down to no energy. So you really get to know who you are when times are tough, and then how you operate. And we always laughed about it. Like, we couldn't be around negative people. Like, we could actually pick up on energy around people because we were so fatigued all the time that you could notice if you went into a room where the energy just wasn't right. And it's funny, as athletes, I think we get to experience that more than your your everyday person that maybe isn't as fatigued and isn't as self-aware. So you got a lot of that out of your years of being an athlete. Did you move straight from that then into studying psychology? What was that transition like?
No. Look, you're 100% correct. The thing I became most aware of were the thought patterns in my own head. And I ended up going to see a quite famous psychologist at the time in Sydney by the name of Arthur Jackson, who did hypnotherapy. And wow, he really turned me around, especially in terms of where I seated myself in races. But the thing I became most aware of was the things that I was saying to myself that were old patterns that were exhausting. They weren't negative on the outside, they were negative on the inside. And I think that's becoming self-aware like that is a gift. And that's how we end up getting what we need. And in my case, the thing was I didn't make it in triathlon. I made it to a decent professional level. I kept getting stuck in the same place, 5th to 7th at every Ironman or top 3 at a 70.3 somewhere, but never good enough to actually win. It's not until you've got the benefit of hindsight that you can see maybe this was for a different purpose.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
No, 100%. I think sometimes it's at the time it feels like this is unfair and I'm, it can be the victim and things aren't working out. And then in hindsight you go, oh, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's like it steered me into the right direction. And look, I remember you racing and you did spend you were more in the longer stuff and I was racing in the shorter stuff. And you were that guy that was always just there, right? And
just there.
But there's also, I often feel like it's the person that was almost just there that often becomes the great coach, the person that understands that the lessons through coming second, third, and fourth and not winning are far more powerful. Like if you ask me who do I want to be coached by, somebody who's won every single race that they've ever done, an Alistair Brownlee or Javier Gomez, enormously talented, worked incredibly hard, or do I want to be coached by somebody who's been through the trenches for most of their life and they're struggle, because there's so much learning there. And sorry, I don't mean to shout up Alistair and Javier, you're amazing and I would love to coach you, but you get my point, right? It's the guy that's actually been through the trenches and has learned so much because that's where all the learning is. I love that.
Yeah. I agree, mate. That's where the learning is. And it wasn't until I started that. It's interesting, right? Because I remember Tim Reed saying to me not all that long ago, actually, because I sat down and I asked some of the crew, what was it that you experienced in our group that was enabled us to do what we were able to do? Reedy just said, and Reedy did move on to Purple Patch and whatnot and became 2016 world champion, but he said it was the ability that you had to hold all those professional athletes in the one place and have them drink from the same trough without killing each other. And I think that's a talent that you foster on through having survived hard times. You respond instead of reacting. And I think that's what makes coaching such a gift, that you can respond without reacting. And that gives the athletes the space to be themselves, which I think is really important.
Well, you think about it, it's like you are the environment that surrounds you. It's like not to bring it back to myself again, but Laura and I are running around Sydney Harbour on the single tracks right now. It's just absolutely magical, even though it's middle of winter, it's just beautiful. And I grew up around, I was very, very privileged to grow up around this neck of the woods, and I was like, wow, that's why I embraced running so much. And now we live in South Florida, and Florida's fine, but it's not conducive to going out there and just running. It just, when you're in the forest and the parks. And I thought, wow, isn't it amazing the environment that you're brought up in, the environment that you're around at any point in your life, how impactful that is on who you become, and what you did with your team. And I'll have you tell me a bit more about your team because I want to, the listeners to learn about some of the team you had. But it's amazing how your team all went on to flourish, whether they were with you flourishing or went on to flourish. that was your genius, and I think that was really cool. So tell me more about the Aeromax team once you moved from being a professional athlete and then going into coaching.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because when I was in Sydney coaching just locally, I had a few guys who made it through to almost pro level in long course. And I thought that was just a fluke. I thought, hey, that's just what happens when you coach. So when we moved to Lennox Head, it was actually John O'Hall who rang me. This is going back quite a way now. And told me about this kid, Tim Burkle, who was 17, I think, in the ITU program, can't swim fast enough. Will you take him? And I said, yeah, I'll take him. And so I moved north to Lennox. Tim and his family moved to Port Macquarie. After about a year or two, Tim got in the car and moved to Lennox. Mm-hmm. And that's where the avalanche kind of started. Then Clayton Fattel came in, then Joey Lampy came in, and it started to get like Velcro. Then a few other pros started moving in. Then I started to structure the environment a bit better. So there was like 15 sessions face-to-face a week, and then it kind of just grew into this nucleus where I was holding this program together where all people had to do was turn up. And I changed the structure every week to fit what we were doing, and that's kind of how it grew. It did grow organically of its own accord, and I think when things like this happen, that's what does happen. Like if you tried to force something like this to happen, I doubt it could. But in this case, it had that organic nature, and as you correctly said, it had that positive nature around it, and it just took off. There was there was Burkle, there was Reedy, there was Clayton Fattel, there was Joey Lampy, and then there was some female pros, and then Brad Calderfelt moved in for his long course transition, and so did Peter Robinson, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, and there was a period there where they were winning everything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's funny when it's like monkey see, monkey do, right? Once that starts happening, that's where the thing kind of has its own life and its own direction. So you start paying attention to what's happening and then making moves. We did things like buy motorbikes for motor pacing and all sorts of things that you just use to pad out this program.
Nice. When did you first sort of get the feedback that, hey, this is working? Was there kind of one event that one of your athletes, Tim or one of the others did exceptionally well in, where you're like, hey, whatever we're doing here, we're not just throwing mud at the wall. It's actually is working.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, I guess the first real result was when Tim won Busselton Ironman. I think it was 2008. He won it in I can't remember, 8:03 or something. It was fast in those days, right? Yeah. And then it was like, okay, we've really got something here, because we had the other athletes sort of coming along as well, and that's where I kind of got the first inkling, like, oh, okay, this is working, this is going to work. And then you kind of, it's not that you've got confidence in yourself, it's that you've got confidence in the culture. And I think that's the key word in these kinds of environments. It's the culture that you build that helps the nucleus grow, you know?
I reckon that's really cool that you're approaching it from the shoulders up, right? I mean, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and I don't mean to offend cats out there, but it's basically, there's a lot of ways we can train physically, and physiologists are getting more and more involved, 100%, and they're worth their weight in gold. Like, I wouldn't go be a professional athlete probably these days if I didn't have a physiologist on board with a mental performance coach of some sort, psychologist, neuroscientist, whatever the title you want to give that person. The impact of having both on your team, if you've got somebody who can do it all, even better. But it's amazing that I feel like there's a bit of a transition now that physiology definitely has its place, and let's just call that below the shoulders. But this above the shoulders, the environment that you create to keep going. And I say at the top of this show, every episode, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. And that endurance one moment longer can only happen if you have a culture or an environment, there's another word for it, where you desperately desire to keep turning up to do the work that needs to be done. And so when you're building these teams, the RMX team and this coaching environment, are you consciously thinking about that and figuring out who to train with who, or what kind of workouts are going to impact that? What are you doing on a daily, or monthly, or is there a plan in place, or are you just kind of winging it?
No, this is interesting because I've always considered myself a bit of a free spirit and not so structured. But when it came to people's plans, I always had them structured ahead of time. I knew exactly what I was doing the next week. I knew exactly where we were going. I knew exactly what sessions we were doing and when we were doing them. But then I let it go. And I think that's the key thing. And importantly, I was doing a little bit of a quarter of a job for Triathlon Australia for a while in Talent ID. And I got some feedback from the coaches there that I'm too friendly with athletes. And I thought that was interesting. And I took that on board and thought, maybe that's true, maybe that isn't true. But at the end of the day, there's a Netflix doco called The Last Dance with the coach Phil Jackson, who talks about the Chicago Bulls. Amazing coach, how he was able to let those guys be themselves and the success that they had because of it. And to me, that was the number one thing. How do I let these people be themselves without and not lean on them without limiting their talents or their self-beliefs? And that was always primary for me as a coach.
So when you're working, every individual's different in the way that they approach, and the way that they're motivated. I think I've shared on this show that, I'm motivated by, you pump me up, you tell me I'm amazing, and I'll keep delivering. Whereas Laura is somebody who's she doesn't want that. She doesn't want any of the fluff. She wants just give me the facts, the engineering type mind, right? So there's these kind of ways of working with individuals that is very different. So, let's say we're all working as a squad. The squad's ticking over pretty well. Championship, world championship, national championship events are on the horizon. Are you bringing any specific mental strategies, mental skills for this to try to maximize an athlete's mental performance going into a race, or are you kind of just seeing how that goes and being a sounding board when needed?
No, I will adapt to what the situation demands. Like I think you are 100% correct. Like there's our sport is being inundated more with let's call it scientific research, algorithms, those sorts of things. I'm a human coach. Like I work best with human nature, and so it's less mechanical. So I guess getting to the root of someone's talents is a matter of allowing them and adapting to your approach to them. If that makes sense. So you can adapt what they need to move forward.
So do you have tools though? I mean, like if I'm an athlete and maybe you as a coach see that I'm underperforming on the race course compared to my training, which we often see with athletes. Sometimes I think the head gets in the way of the body.
Yeah.
Like if you see me and you're like, wow, Greg, you're 10% below on the wattages you're pushing, you're not getting to the first buoy for Americans, fast enough. You're not lifting to your capabilities or even going beyond what your capabilities are in training. What do you say to an athlete like that to really start to dial in their mental performance?
Well, I'll give you an example. Like I don't think Tim Burkle would care at this stage of the game. Like back in I think it was 2014, the year before we went to Kona and we kind of surveyed the course a little bit.
Yeah.
And Tim's funny guy. Like he grew up in Albury, so he calls a spade, and he comes back and he said, "Well, I'm going to get dagged in the swim, and I'm going to get dagged on the climb to Harvey because the attacks are so fierce." So I did what I could in that preparation to the next Kona, because it was his first Kona, to make it so he was physically prepared. And then I suggested to him that we do visualization sessions together, like weekly, sometimes bi-weekly for 6-7 weeks leading into the race. And I got some resistance, but he went, okay. And we did that. And what we did was we worked on him relaxing into the swim and like visualizing himself in this felt sense moving across swim gaps. And when the attack came on Harvey, to simply stare at the wheel in front and keep it the same distance as if a magnet was pulling him across it. And then on the run, it was a matter of, okay, the heat's going to come. So when the heat comes, and you're going to allow the heat to percolate. You're going to allow the lactate to percolate. You're going to allow the pain to percolate and become the conduit to that pain. They sound like mental reframing, but if you do it in a visualization sense where you're actually embodying that process, then your chances of repeating it are much higher. So he went from that quite, I wouldn't say negative mindset, but he had some roadblocks in his way. So he went to Kona for the first time and he didn't get dropped in the swim. He didn't get dropped on Harvey. He got off the bike and he was running third behind Frodeno up on the Queen K, which was shocked me because I don't think I'd ever seen an Aussie do that first time out. Or maybe I had with Chris Lee. I can't remember. But he did fade over the last couple of Ks and ended up 7th. But it was still a great debut by an Australian. And when he finished, he said, I couldn't believe how I was able to absorb the heat simply through choice or handle the gap and the attacks simply through the way I was looking at it. And I think it becomes, if you can find a way to embody the process rather than think it, then your chances of being able to absorb the suck or absorb the discomfort and the pain are far greater than if you try to reframe it, which is probably some of my little problem with psychology. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of point in reframing something. I think it's better just to accept it and allow yourself to feel the discomfort in it, and then in that way becoming a conduit to that discomfort. And that's across the board. That's professional athletes, age group athletes, beginners, whoever. Can we embody this process, and what does it mean for us?
Oh, I love that. It's like you've signed up for this, so embrace it, right? This is what this is actually what, for everybody listening is buying $10,000 bikes and coaches, and you're traveling all around the world, and the suffering is actually what you want. I mean, because all that happens through physical training is you get slightly faster. The suffering doesn't potentially change. It hurts no matter what. And so if you can reframe it to be the point of, like you said, focus on the process rather than just the outcome, and you're very process orientated. And if you can just go, it's almost there's an excitement to it when you start talking like that, but I don't know what it is about us. Maybe we're all just nuts, but you start to think of the suffering and hanging in there and just focusing on that process. And now you visualize that for months, you get to the race and there you are suffering. Yeah. And you're like, this is what I wanted. This is happening. Yeah. And that's a whole reframing in the way that you react to the uncomfortableness of the situation. Oh, that's really cool, mate. I like that a lot. When you're working with athletes then, like that's a great example. When you're working with athletes in daily training, are you kind of aware of these kind of having them visualizing great outcomes in training? Do they? I've always in my own career sort of done the physical visualizing. I'm always see what's going to happen. Are they doing that along the way? Do you plant seeds? You pretend Phil gets commentating in there, and watching him in a race. Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, It's a non-negotiable. Like the pain is a non-negotiable. If
Yeah.
you're going to set a goal, at least turn up for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the embodiment aspect of it. There's a part of that was in our psychotherapy course around automaticity. What you repeatedly do over and over again will become automatic on race day. What is it that you think? What are the things you tell yourself? What are the blocks? What are your fears? What are your doubts? I mean, these are really important things because they're going to come on race day. So if you can handle those before you get there, and you can reorientate yourself back to the process, it comes back to something. I wrote this thing called the cheat code, and there's a part of it called living immediately, which means we live immediately. Stay here in the process that you're in. And the more you do that in training, the more you can expect that on race day. And similarly, in combat sports, if these guys don't have their own ground, if they're not embodied, if they can't breathe deeply into their pelvis and into their legs, they're in danger. And we're in danger to our own goals because we're not present with the task. And, $20,000 bikes and all the other ways that we've got of assessing and judging what's going on are a type of disassociation. So I'm not speaking against that, but I'm saying that I'm here to temper that with this side of the fence, from, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. It's like reacting to reality. How do you want to choose to react to what's going to happen? And how do you prepare for that? On a slight segue to that, then, we talk about athletes, whether they're, fighters or endurance athletes. What about just, someone like Greg now, who's a dad, who's got a couple of businesses he's running, blah, 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 blah. Is there a way that you encourage a similar style of visualizing for daily life, for just understanding to get through each day? Like a lot of people on this show would have heard me talk a lot about practicing gratitude every morning, and getting a good slapper perspective has been a really good thing for me over the last sort of 10 years. But are there other techniques that you kind of think of for people to just get themselves to neutral? I like to say that. It's like, I'm not talking about being happy and positive every day. I'm just saying getting to neutral. Other techniques that you like to bring in?
Yeah, look, none of us in life get off the train without emotional pain and discomfort. Might as well accept it. Like, it's just part of the deal. So it's like, how can we resource ourselves so that we are more grounded in the challenges that happen in this life? And basically, the shortest route to that is just a higher level of presence. So we do things like embodiment practices or grounding practices. Breath works hugely. Anchoring, like learning how to breathe. Like a lot of athletes, I'll say to them, can you breathe into your lower back? Can you breathe down into your pelvis? And they go, well, your lungs don't go down that far. And I go, oh, yes, they do. Do you ever really try it? And what happens when you do? And it gives you this sense of your own ground. And that regardless of what's happening and the challenges that are occurring, we can find our own feet. We can find our own ground. And I think those sorts of practices are really important because they help us to anchor ourselves in sometimes in a wild ocean. And for me, when I look at this type of thing, is I look at it and I go, well, what is the simplest common denominator in resourcing ourselves, in coming back to ourselves right now in this moment? How do we do it? And things like breath work, grounding, all these simple things that you do to bring yourself back here are really, really powerful.
Are there any kind of, just to give us some techniques, any breath work that you found working on yourself that you love to do, whether it be box breathing, or there's names for these, or is it just simply really deep breathing and grounding yourself?
I'll give you an example of one. Okay, like when I work with people who have type A personalities or highly driven athletes, especially junior athletes who aren't all that old.
Yeah.
We do a lot of focusing on breathing into the pelvis, which sounds a little weird. But if you sit and you focus on really expanding the lower belly into the pelvis, that is really, it's such a fantastic anchor. And it's something, it's so easy to do. But especially for an athlete, it's very grounding. For a male athlete, it's really, really helpful for them to move into that feeling of masculine energy, you know? So it's something really simple that's just really powerful.
That is so cool.
And then meditation is just such a huge anchor. I think people get meditation wrong because they think it's actually something that you do, when in actual fact it's something you are. It's underneath the layer of the veneer that we have, you know, everything that's contained in this cauldron of thought, thinking, assessing. If you can just quieten the mind so you can get underneath that and just simply sit and be quiet, like that is really something, that a way that you can resource yourself and bring a lot of peace to yourself.
I think you've nailed it on a couple of those things. You know, definitely the breathing. If you ever need to take yourself, you know, from that sympathetic nervous system, you know, that fight or flight, and into a parasympathetic nervous system of just, you know, relaxation. The breathing. I remember, you know, when my daughter, you know, she was bitten by a rattlesnake when we were in Boulder, and my wife had called me and said, you know, I was out at the airport picking up friends, and I had to get to Denver Hospital where my daughter was being helicoptered to. And I remember I've never had a full state of sympathetic nervous system so on fire, you know.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And I remember I was in the car and I just started driving, and I was driving fast down the 470 and realized I didn't know where I was going. It was almost like this, the mind just took over. And I remember just pulling over, just breathe. Before picking up the phone, trying to figure out where to go, you need to just breathe. And I just sat there, and it felt like I was sitting there for 2 minutes. It was probably only 20 seconds. But I did some box breathing, just breathed in hard and breathed out. And boom, I got myself out of that sympathetic, went straight to parasympathetic, and became very logical, very, you know, on it. And it's such a powerful tool when you have an experience like that. And now athletes can have it when they're on a start line, or a fighter can have it as they're about to go into a ring, or actually maybe a fighter needs to have the sympathetic nervous system. But the point is, if you need to get yourself there, wow, it's a powerful tool. And I think Nesty's book, Breathe, was an eye-opener for a lot of people to realize the powerfulness of actually just breathing and breathing deep. Is it Nesty? Yeah. Who am I? You've read the book,
James Nestor.
Yeah, James Nestor. Yeah. Sorry, Nestor. Yeah, fantastic, mate. What about when it comes to, you know, because I know you work on areas like in terms of focus, and you were talking about, you know, meditation and sort of removing all thought. As athletes, as parents, business, I feel like we're all over the place. We've got screens everywhere. ADHD is going through the roof. Any recommendations on how you can get yourself to clearly focus for periods of time without distraction?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yes, you can. I mean, once again, that it comes back to your level of presence, because exactly what you were talking about is a disassociation that the prefrontal cortex gets engaged, and we go into fight and flight, and we lose our capacity to think rationally because the rational side of the brain's gone offline. So a way that you can kind of bring yourself more into alignment is to simply focus on your state of presence right now, which means you would have to put down the phone, right? and do something really simple, like in grounding. Like if anybody out there Googles the word grounding, you'll see what grounding is. To take your shoes off and go for a walk on a dirt trail. That's grounding. There's research to say that the ions move up through our feet into our body and resource our nervous systems and help us down regulate. That's so true. So something really simple like going for a walk in bare feet is amazingly resourcing, or lying down in a nature field and allowing that natural energy to suck the disassociation out of you and bring you back to a state of here-ness. And it really is that simple. We choose not to be here. And I'm going to give you an example. Like, I do a fair bit of work with people who get anxious or who get really nervous. A lot of athletes will come and do just one-on-one mental skills sessions all around nerves. And I'd say to them the same thing every time. If you stand on the edge of the cliff willingly and look over, what happens? Like, your heart rate goes up, adrenaline's coursing through your body, and everything's engaged. It's the same when you're anxious or when you're in fear. There's just a different mode going on in the way you're thinking. So can we shift that? And so that we're more accepting of what we're feeling. So for me, that means, can you move towards that? So in terms of nerves, right, when people get really nervous, I'm going, we can make the choice to allow nerves to make us bigger. We can allow the nerves to expand our awareness out further so we're more energetic. And everybody thinks nerves are something that they should avoid, but it's just a bullshit story. Sorry, I shouldn't swear.
Right.
But it's like, it can expand you. It can actually make you bigger. They're the choices that we're all making day to day. I don't have control over this phone. I don't have control over this laptop. And you can choose to put that thing down and ground yourself immediately in the present moment, and then reflect on how far away you've been from reality. And have I been worried about what's happened before, and am I worried about what's going to happen next, and how is that affecting the quality of my life right here in this moment?
Well said, mate. I'm a huge advocate for grounding. I love that you've brought it up and we're discussing that, because it is, what I love to do. More so when I'm in Florida. I've found it harder when I'm traveling, but, to just go outside and walk barefoot, practice some gratitude. All of that for me is fantastic. You touched on something that I remember when Laura and I got together in 2000 or whatever, and whatever, early on in our relationship. And, I was a very heightened athlete. I'd go down to races and, nerves everywhere, very nervous. And I used to say to her, are you nervous? She's like, no, I'm excited. And all she's done there is reframe, as to your point earlier, she's reframed the reaction that the body is going through right now with a word.
Yeah.
And she said, no, I'm excited. And I started using that. And so then when I started visualizing and preparing for races, I started saying, you'll have that excited energy. You're going to have that excited energy before a race. Embrace it, right? There, to your point earlier, embrace what's going to happen. It's going to happen. Reframe it to be a way that's like, all right, here it is. This is mean game's on. This is great. And there's a reframing to that. I think you touched on that really well. That's cool. Anybody listening that's dealing with nerves, if you've got to do public speaking or anything else, and the way you're visualizing for that, understand that you're going to have it, but know that that's where life happens. That's the great part about life. It's actually put yourself out there, because that's where the really cool stuff happens. Very cool, mate. When you're talking about visualizing earlier, do you practice with your athletes in the sense that for me, visualizing came very easy. I'm a bit of a daydreamer, I guess, if you like. And Simon Whitfield and I always laughed about it, because we're both dreamers, and we never understood that visualizing didn't come to everybody. Or I even call it feelalizing now, because it's not so much I see something, I feel it. But my wife, Laura, again, I bring her up, struggle with that. So with an athlete that might struggle with actually mentally preparing or rehearsing, how do you work with them?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Some people can't visualize. I mean, when I studied hypnotherapy, I found I didn't actually know that some people can't build a mental picture. And for those people, sometimes it is more a spidey sensing. What are we feeling? What's happening in our body? What can we pay attention to? And it's what can we accept? I mean, there's part of that around, even the negativity of other people. Don't let other people walk through your mind with their dirty shoes on. It's more of a positive attitude. And with some people, you've got to use that other way of getting to what they need. So because at the end of the day, when we get right underneath all of this, all of us have a nervous system, and it doesn't matter what type of person you are. The question is, how do we resource this nervous system to down regulate amongst the challenge that we're putting ourselves into? And for different people, that'll be different ways. For somebody who can't visualize, it might simply be paying attention to what's happening in their bodies. Where are they tense? Where are they holding tension? Can they create a flow? And when they do create that flow inside their bodies, because it's embodied, it's informing their nervous system that, oh, actually this threat is not so great because this person, there's down regulation happening in my body anyway, so I can become a flow and I can relax into this discomfort. And at the end of the day, that's what visualization's for. We're practicing to be relaxed in the face of a challenge. And a lot of the work that I do with athletes is the first question I'll ask them is, how do you relax into discomfort? If you're doing a track session and let's just say it's, 5 times 800 at threshold on a 400 float, how do you relax into that 800? And people say, well, I can't. And I'm going, have you tried? Have you actually encouraged your body to become a flow and relax into that discomfort? And the more that you do that, the more that the outcome can become more down-regulated, and then the more that your performance can benefit from that. So it's a different type of visualization that's a given, but it's still a practice of automaticity that we bring through to race day so that we can buffer that challenge.
It's a funny area, all of this, because, as you speak, I'm kind of thinking back to sort of the way that I would approach my training as an athlete. And I look at myself in almost in two parts. I have my career kind of pre-2000 and then post-2000 when I started working a lot more above the shoulders type work. And I remember you were talking about, relaxing into certain workouts and as an athlete, you're often fatigued. You're about to do 10 1K efforts or whatever, and you're already tired. And so for me to try and relax into that kind of a workout, I would have to change the dialogue in my head and the commentator, which was, Phil Liggett and somebody else normally, and change it to, well, everybody is absolutely smashed. That's been the hardest bike ever. And that would allow me to relax into the first couple of efforts, because I was like, well, everybody around me is hurting. I created this fictional makeup where it's like everybody I'm up against in my head is hurting, and I'm taking more command of it. I'm owning it better than they are. And it's I used to love just playing those kinds of games. They took a bit of effort. Like I'd be driving down to the workout or whatever it is, and I'd be planning what was going to go through my head for that workout. So for me, the takeaway from all of that was visualizing and getting to your point to think in the right narrative. It does take effort. You can't just wing it, like and be like, oh, I can't do it. It's like I used to say to Laura, no, I'm practicing for the hour before I get to my fartlek workout on the trails, what I'm going to be talking about during my workout, and then being flexible enough within the workout if things are going good or bad to play with it. And the more you practice it, like anything, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And it becomes almost second nature. That's what I do. I love the visualizing. It's really cool.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it really is about leaning in, isn't it? Like at the end of the day, like you get a bunch of athletes and they're all of the same fitness, and we've all heard it, right? Like the world is full of great trainers, bad racers, and vice versa, great racers and not such great trainers. But at the end of the day, what really counts is what you do on race day. And that comes down to your ability to relax into that suck, to lean in. And people often think that it's made of a stoic mental toughness. No, I think it's made of a stoic mental acceptance. And part of that is exactly what you said before, gratitude. If you can be in gratitude, then you can accept what you've pitted yourself against, and you can lean into it and relax. Like I remember watching Welshie in his day. Remember that? Like he would just like on that run, he would just absolutely just fall in, just relax into it. And so did you guys. Like, and I think that's the, you stand on the side of enough courses over enough years, you see the tension in people. As the fatigue comes on, they start to stand up more straight. They're not leaning in anymore. They're not relaxing. And that's where everything goes pear-shaped. So we need some kind of circuit breaker there to bring us back into that relaxing and leaning in.
There's almost like this, there's this tension that we put on ourselves. And I've had enough, exceptional athletes on this show over the years that have all talked about, I went into this race completely relaxed, because of whatever situation. Maybe they were already a world champion or whatever. They were just relaxed. Or maybe they'd been injured for so long that they just didn't care. And then they have these outstanding performances because they were just relaxing, to your point, leaning into it. And I call it like they're free to play. Like there's this, when you're free to play, the tension is removed, that all of a sudden you're like, that's the performance I've been waiting for, because I've removed the gorilla off my back and now I'm free to play. I think it might have been Sebastian Kinley when he won the 2013 Ironman World Champs or whatever. And I remember it was something like that for him. I can't remember the exact quote, or maybe it was his second 70.3 world title, whatever it was. He was talking about going, yeah, Greg, I had zero expectations on myself, the expectation gorilla. And I just was free to go have some fun and see what happened. And that, to me, I remember that a few times in my own career, and you're probably nodding your head going, yeah, I remember that too. And so we can all remember that time when we were just like almost kids just playing. And if you can get yourself to that point on a start line or before a speech or whatever the stressor is that is on you right now, it's amazing how much fun you can actually have with it, and your performance is just so much better because of it. I love that space, mate. It's really cool. Now, look, we've covered breathing, grounding, visualizing, being present, leaning into it, relaxing into it, focusing on the process. Am I missing anything else? And meditation and the benefits. Are we missing anything else on what we can do in our daily lives, forgetting the sport for the moment? Are we missing anything else that you would say, hey, Greg, you forgot this. This would be really cool?
I think there's one final piece to the whole thing, actually, that word flow, that keeps coming up in psychology. It keeps coming up in sports performance. It keeps coming up in life. How do we get flow? And you described it so eloquently. Kids have it naturally. They're curious. They're inquisitive. They lean in. They fall in. They're excited. And I think that is the definition of that flow that Sebastian found in that place, where it's like he's got the inquisitiveness, the curiosity of that child who can reconnect back to that energy. And in that flow made of nothing other than the present moment comes the power to put the performance through the conduit. And as soon as we leave the present moment and we project into the scary future or go back into the diabolical past, we're out of our power and we're out of flow. And I think the flow is the seam in the middle, and that's where we need to be aiming for all the time. How do I get my flow back? How do I get flow?
I really like that a lot. I've talked about that. I think might have been the episode I did with Seth Pepper, who you'd get along really well with. I've had him on the show a couple of times, also mental performance coach, and you guys would really hit it off. And we were talking about flow, and that's such a good way of putting it. And I think we were talking about big wave surfers, and how they cannot have any distractions, and they must reach that state of flow or they die. Like it's like you focus so intently on that one thing, right? It's almost meditative. You are so singularly focused on the one process, the one thing. You are so there. I like how you've put it. It is almost like everything we've talked about comes to that singular, point of flow. Fantastic.
I heard Kelly Slater interviewed about his 11 world titles. And the interviewer said, how were you able to do this? And he said, left arm, right arm, splash the water. And he said, because if I'm sitting on first reef's pipeline and I have to take off in 5 feet of water on a 20-foot wave, I need to be fully here. And that's just a classic example.
It really is. I think that's awesome. I got to look that one up. That's very cool. Well, Grant, this has been really fantastic. Before I let you go, I like to ask all my guests final 4 questions, and then maybe a quick bit of rapid fire. Even though you were a long course athlete, I think you've still probably got some fast twitch fiber in you. But let's go final 4. What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
What I'd tell my 18-year-old self is, it isn't that serious. Get yourself out of the future and get yourself out of the past, and enjoy what you've got right in this moment.
Be present. Be present.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's one of the best ones I've had. Well done.
Yeah.
3 people you'd want to have dinner with, ideally non-family, living or dead.
This is going to sound strange. I've got this little bit of a thing for Stoicism, and a lot of Marcus Aurelius's writings are there, which I didn't find until after he died, strangely enough, in his journals. I love it. I'd love to have dinner with him.
Yeah.
Gandhi, it'd be fantastic. And there's a guy who's long dead now named Ramana Maharishi, who was an incredible teacher of oneness and presence. They'd be my 3.
What a great dinner that'd be. Yeah. My goodness.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You couldn't leave that table feeling unhappy, could you?
No, it actually touches on one of the businesses I'm building with a group at MIT that we, my goal is to make this very much a reality for a lot of people. Anyway, we can talk about that offline. We don't need to go down that whole rabbit hole of that whole thing, but it is, sitting in a room with these Stoics or whoever it may be, that you can actually have a conversation with them would be very cool. All right, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, mate? You're obviously still heavily involved in all sports. You're heavily involved in, the psychology and what we think having a direct impact on our physiology. Where do you go?
So that's a good question, mate. I love coaching. Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. And as far as coaching goes, I don't think then we need to label it. Coaching can be mental prep. It can be physical preparation. It can be mentoring.
Yeah.
It can drift into so many different areas. But at the end of the day, I love working with people, and I'm probably more passionate now about coaching than I've ever been in my life. So in 5 years' time, I'd really like to be at a point where I'm able to mentor athletes towards what they really want to achieve. And I mean all kinds of athletes, anybody, not just elites, but anybody who wants to get the best from their life and their existence. I'm up for it, and that's coaching.
Isn't that love? Isn't that awesome when you know who you are, you know what you want, and you just can go after it? And I say that as a, just respect, because it's hard for a lot of people to know who they are and what they want, and you keep thinking, is there something else I should be doing? And it's to know what you want like that, mate, is very cool. How do people get in touch with you if they want your services? Is it website, LinkedIn? What's the best way to contact you?
I'm on all of them, mate, but my website is grantgiles.com.au. And there's a section in that with just Grant, work with Grant, which is the psychology stuff's in there, the triathlon coaching. And so they can contact me there. I'm on Facebook, which has quite a big following because I write on there a lot. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and everywhere else. You can just, like everybody else, mate, these days. I know. It's not Google like Grant Giles, you'll find me.
I was saying to Laura when I wake up in the morning now, and because I've got a couple of things going, I basically go, okay, my Apple email, my Outlook email, Teams, then I go over to Instagram DM, WhatsApp, then I go into LinkedIn DMs I said, by the time I actually think anybody listening who's in tech who wants to build a great product, link it all together. So I wake up and go, boom, it's all in one place. There's a business there. I'm saying it out loud. Maybe I should edit this out and just go do it, because I feel like there's 30 different things you can you can have to look up to connect with people, and then you can't remember where, I get a note from you and we're chatting and I'm like, well, hell, where was I talking to Grant from? Was he on WhatsApp? Was he on LinkedIn DM? And then I can't find it. I'm like, oh man. So I apologize to people that write me and I don't get back to you quickly. I can't find them. Anyway, next one. This is not meant to be morbid, but if you only had 6 months to live, how would you want to use those remaining days?
Oh, that's an easy one for me. I would just love the people I love because, at the end of the day, when we're all on our deathbeds, I think that'll be the only thing that's left.
Yep.
So it's the relationships that you have with people and the love that you feel for them that would be the most important thing. So
awesome.
That's, wouldn't want to go and do anything. I just want to be
You're a good man.
Really being in that. Yeah.
Awesome, mate. I love it. You're a good man.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish off with some rapid fire questions. Here we go. First car.
Oh, Chrysler Sigma.
I love it. What year was that? What year model was that?
Oh, mate, that was like I want to say 1985, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right around when I was then as well. All right, one book you would gift to a friend, a.k.a. me.
That's a good question. Okay, I'll give you the book that started everything for me. It's a book by a little guy named Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm going to get that one for sure. I think I might have even read. I think I've got that already. All right. Favorite movie? Greatest movie of all time, actually. Let's rephrase that. Greatest movie of all time.
Oh, Shawshank Redemption.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Morning or night person?
Morning.
Favorite sport to watch?
Oh, probably still surfing.
Ah, very cool. Two most used apps on your phone?
Email, the Google email and Facebook Messenger. I think about that for a second.
No, it's almost like I can tell people's age.
I know, right? That's tragic. I'm not on TikTok.
No, I know. Yeah. TikTok and Instagram. No. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Nice. Biggest pet peeve, if you have one?
Oh, biggest pet peeve. Resistance. My own resistance. Yeah.
Always fighting in your head. Shut up.
Yeah, no, just resistance to anything. The feeling of it.
That's interesting. I'm trying to even wrap my head around that to see if I have a little bit of that. Or maybe it's a guy thing. I feel like my wife and daughter are yes to everything, and I'm always like, yeah. My son and I are kind of like, yeah, no, we're good. Nah.
Yeah.
All right, favorite holiday destination?
Well, okay. The place I've been that I've enjoyed the most was Sri Lanka.
Oh, classic.
Yeah.
All right. Is there one word to describe yourself? Hard one. If you can't do it, you can't say pass.
I'm going to give Clayton Fattel said to me not all that long ago, Gilesy, you are eccentric. And I went, what? And he goes, you are eccentric. So I'm going to roll with eccentric.
Go with it. Go with it. There we go. I love it. All right, last one. Greatest decade of music.
Oh, mate, I'd have to say the 80s, even though I wouldn't listen to anything from the 80s. I think it was the thickest in terms of, the environment and the culture and the way it was just so thick.
Yeah. And even if you think about a lot of the greatest songs that come out now, are just remixes of the 80s with a different beat.
Yeah.
Because I like today's music too, but yeah, I'm a big fan of the 80s myself. Well, very cool, mate. So, all right, what's the plan for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, rest of the year? Everything on track?
Oh yeah, I'll probably go and do an Instagram video after this. I'm being told that I need to get the content out there and stop sitting on all of it. So that's kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's a lot of work, isn't it? It's a lot of work to keep up with and get your knowledge out
it's a lot of work.
And how you want to
But
do
you know
it.
what? Exercise is still critical for me. Like I know some people stop. I've never stopped.
How much exercise are you doing these days? How much are you training?
I paddle ocean going paddle boards, 14 feet long, like 21 inches wide, and I ride them in rough water, and I love it.
Oh, that's cool.
and I've got this goal to paddle the Molokai Strait with a friend of mine, Mick DeBetta, who's a coach on the Gold Coast.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Just because you need something different, right? So for me, that's my long-term goal.
That's awesome. You should hook up Simon Whitfield, massive into his stand-up paddling.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He's gone between all the islands up, what are they called? The San Juan Islands and up in Victoria, Canada. Yeah, he's out there on his. He talks about it the same way. Although I don't know if he's still doing as much, or I think so, but he's right into it.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, good man.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny? We do all these different sports, and you just got to keep moving, and you got to keep looking for things to keep you interested and engaged. It's like these days, Laura and I probably do 40 minutes to an hour of something each morning. Ideally, we play some tennis every now and then, and I'm tempted to get into golf a little bit more, but we'll see.
I think it's still true, right? Like I think you change your mind, change your energy. I mean, that is actually true, and you can be having a bad day and go and do an hour's exercise and everything looks different through a clean filter. It's amazing.
It is. That's all part of that, like you're talking about, the grounding and the breathing. It's all combined, the meditation. It's all there in exercise. It's fantastic. All right, mate. Well, this has been really fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed this chat, and it was great to reconnect. It's been a long, long time. And congrats on everything you're doing, all the athletes you've worked with. All of them are incredible careers and incredible human beings, and that all comes to them having their time, not all of it with your time with you, but obviously you created that environment. So congrats on all of that, and thanks again for coming on the show, mate.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me, mate. It was great. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, buddy. And for everybody listening, you can find all the show notes and timestamps and everything else at bennettendurance.com/media. All right, stay on the line, mate. Cheers. Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and this was another fascinating conversation with a man who not only specializes in sport, but also psychology, and combining the two of them, Grant Giles. We have a wonderful chat, whether we're talking about breathing or grounding, visualizing, and everything in between. He sums it up so well at the end when we really narrow it down to finding that state of flow that we're all kind of searching for, and how we can get there in whatever we're doing, that whether that be in sport or in daily life. Just a really profound and great conversation with a great human being. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer.